Hello and welcome to Renaissance, where we broaden our skills to better our lives. Today we're changing the front brakes on a 2018 Honda Odyssey. So of course, the first thing here is we start by jacking up the car, removing the tire. I'm not going to get into details about that, but we need to be safe. Put a jack stand in there. Should never work on a vehicle supported just by the tire. We're going to get in there with a 14 millimeter wrench or socket, and we're going to remove the caliper mounting bolts there. Then we also have to remove the brake hose banjo bolt. We're using a 12 millimeter socket for that. Taking the brake caliper off, it sits right there on the control arm pretty well. And then we're using a 19 millimeter socket and a breaker bar trying to break apart this caliper mounting bracket. Realized that caliper was in the way, so we grabbed a caliper hanger, hanging it from the suspension up top there. And there we go. We were able to get it free. So after getting those bolts out, the next step is to take off these brake pad clips. Just gonna take them off. Get those caliper bracket bolts out all the way. Pull it off the car. And then I'm using a little impact screwdriver here. This is the cheap one. Seemed to work pretty well. Took a little bit to figure out how to get the direction going the right way. And we're just going to get this little flathead set screw out of the brake rotor there. The next step is going to be to try to kind of free the rotor off of there. I usually just hit it with a hammer. If you hit it on the face a couple times or around the back, it tends to come off pretty well. If for some reason you have one rusted on really hard, there's some information out there. There's some bolt holes through that rotor face. You can actually thread bolts in. It'll push it off out of there. And so now what we're doing here is just cleaning behind where the rotor sits. This tends to get rusted pretty crummy. So I usually just hit it with some brake cleaner and then start scrubbing away with a cheap brass brush, using the brake cleaner to kind of brush all the brake dust, rust, everything else away. Just kind of inspect everything while you're back there. Look at all these boots and clamps. Make sure that everything looks like it's in okay shape. I usually go ahead and use that brass brush and brush off the faces of everywhere the caliper bracket sits, everywhere that it binds before I bolt it back on. Then I just pull the whole brake caliper assembly here out and start brushing away. You probably want to wear a mask for this. That brake dust is definitely not good for you. What I try to do is blast it away, wet it down, get it out of the way as best as I can while I'm cleaning through the whole cleaning process. So just get in here, get all around. I like to use the brass brush. Be really light around these boots from the caliper pistons there. But we do want to get it nice and clean because the next step is going to be to compress this back together, get those pistons pushed back in. And if those boots are dirty, you're going to have a lot of issues getting it in. They might fold, they might rip. So there is a special tool that you can get to push these pistons back in, made for brakes, made for doing this. But I find that just taking the old brake pad, laying it across, grab a clamp. If you have a C clamp, that would be better. This is like an F-style carpentry clamp. It's what I had close by. I just do this nice and slow. Sometimes you got to work back and forth between the two sides as best you can. Getting pressure in the center of that pad works the best. And I'm just watching the caliper boots there, or the piston boots, making sure that they're going together nicely. If anytime I saw them starting to bind or anything, I would go ahead and stop, clean it, try to push it in with something soft, not sharp. I find that the end of like a kid's paintbrush works pretty well for that. So now I'm taking the whole caliper shoe here, and I'm pulled out the old brake pads. You can see that they were pretty worn. Probably had a little bit of life left in them, but it was getting there. This vehicle had about 70,000 miles on it. I think we've done the brakes once before. Inside of this caliper mount, or inside of this pad mount, there are these brackets. So we're popping all these brackets out. Before you pop them out, you probably want to make sure that the new pads you bought came with new brackets. Sometimes they don't. Most of the time they do. So mine did. I wasn't worried about damaging these or bending them at all, but you might want to be careful. It's always good to take an opportunity, and so I'm going to take this opportunity before I get too deep into this to make sure that the pads that I ordered are right. So that's me just comparing them, kind of making visually observing, making sure that that I have the right pads to finish the job. And so now we're going to clean this bad boy up. Again, just a brass brush, brake cleaner. I'm paying particular attention to everywhere that different parts have to meet and touch. This brake dust gets built up over time. You kind of jam things up. We want this stuff to move freely and to do what it's supposed to do to have a safely stopped vehicle. And so you can see we're just getting in there with a brass brush, especially in these little areas right here where these clips and brackets have to sit. So going through the whole thing again, probably want to wear a mask. I like to wear gloves. Don't want that brake cleaner, the brake dust all over me. It's got some nasty stuff in it. So here we go. I'm pulling out the slide pins. I've pulled them out there. I like to do this kind of an extra step. If you kind of hold the rubber boot, you can just pull that pin right out. I clean them off, and then I just take some heavy duty grease and a paintbrush. I grease them back up. Get grease all over them. I'll even take a little bit of grease on the end of the brush there. We'll stick it into the boot. I'm putting these slide pins back in, kind of turning them around, pushing them in and out. Get that boot to seal back up. Make sure everything's moving nice and freely. We're going to put the new brackets in. A lot of times, and I didn't do it here, but what you may want to do is take a little bit of silicone brake grease, put them between the bracket, between these clips and the pad bracket itself, and that can help eliminate some squeaking. It can kind of help keep things, just moving well and working well over time. So once those clips just push right in, once they're in, you can see the little tube of brake grease, and then a little paintbrush, and I'm just putting a very thin layer over these caliper or over these brake pad clips. That helps these to slide, helps these pads to slide in and out. And look, I buy just a giant pack of these, kids' art paint brushes from the big box store, and I use them for everything. So again, just comparing parts, taking the old rotor, taking the new rotor, looking at them next to each other, comparing them, making sure generally it looks like I have the right part. You should have the right part with modern manufacturing and ordering, but you never know. You might get shipped the wrong thing. So I'm looking at the width, I'm looking at the diameter, I'm looking at the stud mounting locations, kind of make sure everything looks good. Taking this, hitting it with some brake cleaner and a clean rag. This is the surface where your pads squeeze against this rotor and stop the car, and so, or this disc really, and so we want to make sure it's nice and clean. Unfortunately, I didn't show the process of putting the new disc on there, but if you watch our video for the rear brakes that'll be coming out soon, it's going to show that process. So here we are putting the caliper bracket back in place, and just hand tightening those screws. And then we're gonna hit them with a ratchet. It's a 19 millimeter, and then we're gonna hit them with this torque wrench and get them torqued to spec. So always look at these torque specs in the manual. You can get the Chilton manual through your library, most likely nowadays through an online database. So hitting these to 101 foot-pounds. And now we're going to go ahead and put in these brake pad clips. So these clips just help to spread the pads apart. They just slide right into place, and then they're going to be held on there by the caliper shoe. And so we just set these in the holes, make sure they have a little tension on them. It just helps them to spread apart after you're not applying the brakes anymore. And the caliper is going to slide right over the top of that, so you'll have to finesse it a little bit. If you've compressed those pistons back in all the way, it should slide right on, but remember those clips are pushing the pads out, and so you'll kind of have to push those pads together in order to slide the whole assembly back on. Take your time, make sure everything slides into place, the clips stay into place, nothing's hung up on anything else, and then get these caliper bolts back in. So again, same process, 14 millimeter, probably hit it with a socket first, not nearly as tight as the others. Around 30 foot-pounds. I wouldn't be scared to put a little bit more on there, but try to follow the manufacturer recommendations there. And then we get the brake hose put back on, 12 millimeters, around 30 foot-pounds again, that we'll get on there. I usually just kind of feel these, just kind of hand tight on the socket there. It's not going anywhere. And then the tire goes back on, and this is pretty typical process. If you're not changing tires, you're probably not quite ready to be doing the brake job itself. So here we go. I like to put the bottom one in first so it doesn't swing out, and then get them all hand started. I get kind of 2 clicks on the impact there, and then go around with the torque wrench. Then I drop it down and get kind of final torque with the torque wrench per the manufacturer specs. So thanks for watching the video. If you don't mind, just hit the like button and subscribe. Would love to be able to keep making more videos for you guys. Thanks so much.